the Wild in 2005, I think he looked like, what's this Florida hockey writer coming up? What does he know anything about hockey? And so I think it took him a little while to try to figure out who I was and that I loved the sport and that maybe that I knew the sport and things like that. And years later, after the presser, he pulls me to the side of the presser and he just told me how much he respected me and how and just my work ethic and my passion for the game and knowledge of the game. And that honestly was almost in tears. It really came out of the blue because of all the coaches I've ever covered in the NHL. I would say that with Jacques and me, it was the most working relationship and not really on a personal side that I ever felt like I got to know him from that standpoint. And so that really, really meant a lot that he kind of conveyed his respect for me because I absolutely respected covering him. And, that really is the way that it is with almost every single human being that I've ever covered in the sport. I was thinking, so I'm staying at the Airport Marriott in LA in a couple of days. And I haven't stayed there in years. And Dane Mizutani, who works for the Pioneer Press, was telling me how great of a hotel it was. And I was like, really? Like, I remember from years ago where it was breaking down and, and all that stuff. And he was like, no, it's modern. They've renovated and all this stuff. And I started having all these, like, recollections of me in the mid to late 90s in the bar at the Champions, just hanging out after games at, like, midnight, 1 a.m. with Brian Murray and Chuck Fletcher and talking hockey. And those were the days when you basically learn most of your stuff, Jim, from the bar after hours when you talk to the coach or the GM or the assistant GM or whatever. And that stuff doesn't exist nearly as much anymore. It just doesn't. And so it's funny. It's just kind of an old memory that I had of just me I'll never forget it. Me hanging out in the bar at the Champions at that LAX Marriott when Brian Murray point blank told me we're getting rid of Beezer. Beezer's done here. And it turned out to be one of the bigger stories that I had in Florida.
Cool stuff. Let's thank, remember, we have a deal with Bite Squad. The promo code is Talk North, but I recommend going to bitesquad.com, seeing what the deal is in your area and what restaurants are near you. They deliver great food from great restaurants. Use the Bite Squad app. Makes everything very simple. Morning, noon, night, home, office, or elsewhere. Again, our promo code is Talk North, but check out other options at bitesquad.com. Let's see, from Jason of the North, do you think the NHL still tries to participate in the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics?
I think that the PA is definitely going to push for that. So I do think so.
You do think so? Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I think the PA will push for it, and I think if the NHL and the PA could, go into the collective bargaining agreement and try to figure out some stuff, I think that's going to be a big part of the negotiating process.
Interesting. All right.
Because remember, just because they push this down the line, it just means that there's no work stoppage here in a couple of years. But eventually they are going to have to rework on this or tweak some things in the CBA.
Right. From Carson, what Minnesota sports team will have more wins, Wolves or Wild? I think the Wolves are probably headed for a victory total in the high 30s. What do you think?
I would say it's going to be close.
Yeah. And from Zeke Boyett, do you think Guerin is more likely to let the season play out in its entirety with the lack of rentals on this team or sell off, trade any pieces that he can around the deadline?
Yeah, I think probably the former there. I really do. Really, the only rental that I can think of theoretically would be Koivu. And Koivu's got a full no move. So if he doesn't want to go somewhere else, he doesn't have to go somewhere else. But other than that, unless Patterson has 2 years left on his deal. I guess theoretically Brad Hunt. Is that it? I think that's it. Trying to just go through my head here. I think that's it in terms of what would be the so-called definition of a NHL rental at the trade deadline. So, I think the one thing that where Paul Fenton really erred last year is that you forget that a lot of times if you want to make a quote unquote hockey trade, the best time to do that is over the summer because you're theoretically dealing with 30 teams rather than 16 playoff teams. And that automatically means that your value might go up for a bunch of players on your team because you could create a bit of a bidding war. And he really didn't do that. So, I do think it makes much more sense to, if you're going to start selling off assets, to wait closer to the summertime around the draft And remember, playoff teams usually want guys in the last year of their deal. So I think Zeke's question probably has to do with that one.
Yeah. From Ben, with such a road-heavy schedule early, do you think the Wild and its players put too much pressure on themselves early, which has helped contribute to so many players having slow starts? Feels like a different year. Players give themselves more time to settle in before frustration mounts.
Well, definitely. I mean, if you're struggling right off the hop, it just frustration mounts, and when you're on the road mostly, it just makes it much more difficult to really find yourself. And so, I think there's something to that. And it's funny because I look at the second half schedule, and there's a 7-week stretch from between January to like mid-February where the Wild are like on the road like once or twice or one-off games in Calgary and I think a home away back-to-back, if I remember, against in Chicago potentially. So they just don't have a lot of road games. But the problem is by then is your season over. Theoretically, is your season over. And so they've got to figure out a way here. That's why some of these losses really have stung. That not getting the extra point in St. Louis at the home game the other day with the really ridiculously officiated game the other night by Graham Skilliter. The blown game in Dallas. Playing, and then what it does is then when you play well in St. Louis the next night and don't get the win, it makes for a devastating feeling coming home to that St. Louis game. Just because you just blew the game the night before, so they've got a lot of work to do to get a lot of the minds on this team playing well. It just is compounded for guys like Donato and Cunnin and Greenway. These guys aren't scoring. We're starting to see much better play right now from Zuccarello, from Fiala, from Stahl, and so. But it takes a while once you start off. I mean, look at the minuses on this team right now.
Yeah, absolutely. From Patrick John, what is the player food situation like before and after games? Do they get lavish meals catered in after a game?
Yeah. So the way it works is at home, they obviously they have a chef. Both at their practice facility, they have a chef that cooks some food, breakfast and after practice snacks and things like that. And when they're at home, same thing. After a game, they have essentially a buffet in their locker room that gets their nutrition back up. On the road, it's sort of the same thing. They get back to the hotel after a morning skate, and they immediately have a catered lunch. And then there's before the game, there are snacks and things like that. But then after the game, what they do is they have a catering service in every town that essentially gives them food at the rink that they could take to the plane. They do have food, I believe, on the plane. Again, for a while, they were not doing that. They just had it, the catered food after a game in the locker room, and essentially, and then they have a certain type of companies that they deal with that know exactly the type of nutrition that they want. They've gotten rid of, back in the old days, it used to be just pizza and meat sticks and stuff. And,
it's amazing. That is one of the biggest changes in sports in our era. It used to be guys just get pizza and they would just go out and eat crap for lunch or crap for dinner, and they drink 18 beers every night. And the modern athlete wants to delve into nutrition, and the modern organization is smart enough to understand how important that is.
Yeah, and a lot of players now have their own nutrition too, their own diets. I mean, a lot of these guys are are in lactose-free diets, gluten-free diets. Jason Zucker is one of them. Zach Parise is another, I believe. So that's the other thing is that they do have to cater specifically to certain players and their type of diets. Where a guy like Ryan Suter's willing to he kind of scoffs, or at least he used to scoff at this type of stuff.
John also asked if you get to partake, and of course the answer is no.
No. Once in a while, I'll grab a piece of gum from the locker room. Sometimes, like earlier this year, we were in Toronto and the locker room was cleared out. We were waiting for Jerry Mayhew, I think, because he was doing TV, and I was in the locker room and I grabbed a bottled water off the locker room table and things like that. That's about all I would ever do.
From Nick T, what are your thoughts on Donato's overall game? Is the pressure to perform getting to him?
Yeah, I mean, it's struggling. I remember when they traded for him in New York and we interviewed Paul Fenton, and Fenton was telling us that nobody in the NHL has seen Ryan Donato more than me because he had Jimmy Vesey on Harvard And so he had seen Ryan Donato play a lot of hockey, both in his youth level because he's from that area, Paul Fenton, and then minor league level, but also college level, and he really believed in him. But right now, man, this is it's crazy. The slump he's in, dating back to last year too. If you remember his last 7 or 8 games of last year, he only had an assist after being a point-a-game player his first 15 games. So he just doesn't look like the same player. He doesn't get a lot of shots at all anymore. Gets knocked off pucks a lot, falls a lot, and it's just it's been hard to watch. And I know that Bruce is not showing a lot of faith in him either. He's playing him on the fourth line. The other night in Anaheim, we saw that when Bruce cut the bench to pretty much 10 or 11 forwards, Donato and Fiala were the 2 odd guys out. So clearly defensively, in a 1-goal game in the third period, despite Fiala's goal, Bruce showed very little faith in him, and same thing with Ryan Donato.
We'll be back at Tin Shed on November 13th and November 20th. Starting time, 7 o'clock. We usually make those 1-hour shows. Our studio shows or remote shows tend to be a little bit shorter, so sometimes we save good topics for the longer shows. So if we didn't read your Twitter question, send it out to us on those show days. We'll try to get to them then as well. 2 more Twitter questions, then we'll wrap up. Remember, go to tinshedmn.com. You'll get coupons. You'll find out what their deals, their happy hours, their Kids Eat Free program is. And I think they have a 2-for-1 pizza deal. Just go to Tinshed MN. You'll see information about our shows and about all their deals. And we appreciate them hosting shows. 2 more Twitter questions. Michael will get back to the California sunshine. From Eric Marvel, Parisi looks very anguished at the moment. How much of that has to do with the trade rumors? How much is due to the state of the team not being anywhere close to ready for a cup run?
I think it's all of the above. I think it's that. I think it is, the off-season stuff. I think it's his own play. And other factors as well. So I don't disagree with you. I think he's wearing it on his face right now. He's struggling. And this is a guy that led them in scoring last year, not just goals, but points. So I still think he figures a way coming out of it. A lot, just like any player, it's confidence with him. He just, the biggest concern with him is shot volume. Very little right now. Not a lot of great chances. He's not the same threat that he's always been on the power play at all. And he doesn't seem to be skating great. He's having a lot of trouble catching pucks. That's the one thing I've noticed all year long. I don't know if it's his sticks or what. He can't catch pucks. There were 2 scanned forechecks the other night would have been the first period where just behind the net, just a pass. Again, it might be the Anaheim ice or what. But passes just behind the net, just hop right over his stick and then boom, out. And that's the end of that forecheck. And so, I think that, look, Zach's a heck of a proud guy, a good player. I still think that he'll figure out a way to get out of it. But you're right. I don't think he's the happiest camper right now, just gauging the way that he looks on the ice and all that stuff.
Last question of this show. Thanks to everyone who listens. Follow us at Talk North Pod. Thanks to our producer, Brandon Morton. From Nick Bremer. On the last pod, you mentioned Sokolov is not really a prospect at this point. Care to elaborate why, given he was second in points for a rookie with 30 last year?
Yeah, because he's not. He can't skate. He's not in the greatest shape. He plays fourth line there. He's not. So it's just what I see. I mean, the guy was sent to Allen last week because he can't get in the lineup. He didn't play in the AHL playoffs, and he has not played really at all this year in the regular season. That's not a prospect. So
yeah, pretty simple. Hey, good stuff from Michael. Thanks for taking the time, Michael. We'll see you November 13th at Tin Shed. And thanks to everyone who listens and everyone sponsors this program.
Pretty little city built on a hillside. Music in the bars and fire in the sky. We went to the beach